Hi listeners, welcome to Bridging the Gap. I am one of your hosts, Cooper Green, and today, one of our clinical VPs, Nicole Stevens, and I are sitting with John Delony. Today we have some questions from our staff that came in after the SelfCare Summit back in May, so we are going to dive into those today. John and Nicole, will you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves and we can start off this episode.
I am Nicole Stevens. I am a clinical vice president at Utah Behavior Services. I've been there 15 years and I love what I do. I'm a therapist and a behavior analyst.
There you go.
And I'm John, and I'm running a scam, otherwise known as a podcast.
He's a professional YouTuber at this point.
I'm a professional YouTuber.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Well, at Utah Behavior Services, we just had our self-care event for 2024. We did have the honor of having John there to be a speaker. Most of you guys know John from his podcast. He is, a lot of people come in tune for his show for seeking mental health and help with their relationships. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's emotional health and mental health. And it started as a mental health show, and then it's evolved to almost entirely relationships and emotional health. Yeah.
So you and George, you guys flew in last month. How was that? How was Utah Behavior Services Self-Care Summit? What did you guys think of that?
That was amazing. It was cool to see a group of a leadership team say, we know that y'all have a tough job. Everybody in that whole organization has a tough job. And so we're going to invest in your life outside of here. A, because we love you. And B, we want the best for you ongoing. And C, a well you shows up better for the families that you're serving. And so you just don't see that very often. Most companies are about, how can I compress? How can I squeeze the most blood out of this turnip so that I can make the most money? And it's cool to be around an organization that's about serving people, and both the people who work here and for the people outside of the organization, the families. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And everybody's so hospitable and welcoming, and the green room was awesome. So it was cool. Good snacks.
That is the test of every event.
That's
is the food,
How
right?
How close is the bathroom and other good snacks?
Yes.
Can you go over a quick summary of what you talked about there and why it's so important for our staff not to only hone in on their mental health being, but also George came there, finances, and we had several other speakers there. Can you touch on that as well?
I have no idea what I talked about. What did I talk about that day?
You did a lot of connection and emotional. Not
that's
so much
right.
the bricks, but the connection and find people and choose.
Yeah.
wellness.
I talked about, I guess the overarching idea is that we've created the loneliest generation in human history, and mental health, being a mental health practitioner is a very lonely job, because you're with a client, but you're all by yourself, and you're with a family, but it's sometimes them versus you, or sometimes it's you leading them, but they're not your friends. They're not your romantic partner. They're not any of these like core relationships that we need. And so you can wake up and you've been with people all day, but you haven't been with anybody, with your nervous system, right? And you do that 8 hours on 8 hours on 8 hours. And then what I find across the country with mental health practitioners, especially, and behavioral analysts, folks who work in the messy lives of other people, is you're all peopled out. And so someone's like, hey, you want to come hang out Friday night? And you're like, nope. And they're like, hey, you want to come go on the lake on Saturday? And you're like, I want to stay in my house in the air conditioning and not talk to any humans.
Yep.
And so, which is a good way to recover. But if you do that over a long period of time, your body recognizes you're completely alone. And it ends up hampering your ability to be well physically, psychologically, emotionally, relationally. And then it impacts your job, impacts the people you're trying to serve. And so at the end of the day, I think to have any sort of wellness, anything, you have to have other people in your life doing life with you, as uncomfortable as that can be for us.
You have any thoughts on that as well?
This is one of the pieces, all due respect, this is one of the pieces that I have had to make work for me, because John is very much like, go get people, go get friends, right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get people. I'm going to find friends. And then I'm like, I'm exhausted and I don't have anything to talk to you about, because the other thing when you're in the field that we're in is you talk to people about their stuff all day long and it's all their real stuff, right? And so it's very hard to go make friends in the real world and talk about real stuff and not feel like you're moving into therapist mode, either from their expectations of you or your expectations of you. And so the connection part for me looks a little bit different. Like I do a lot of connection with like my husband and with my kids and like, okay, let's go do stuff as a family rather than like, I'm going to go have girlfriends and we're going to go hang out every Friday night. Like I know. See, we differ.
But I think it's a good call out for it. I don't know anybody who works as a mental health practitioner or is in this world that their friends find out or their friend's friend finds out. Good gosh.
Yeah.
Right? It happens to me in like airport bathrooms. And it's like, it happens to every friend I know who's in this space.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you got a second? You're like, oh, here we go, man. Yeah. Like I've been dealing with this trauma all week. And and then the other side of it is we also sit at a table. And I say this with all due respect just for humanity, but you sit at a table and you listen to people talking. And they're like, oh, no, people do this because of X, Y, and Z. Or no, this many marriages, like the best thing. And you're like, that is so clinically inaccurate. Yeah. And you find yourself policing conversations. This is exhausting. Yep. And you need to have a group of girlfriends that you hang out with.
Yeah, I go in fits and spurts. I hear him talk and I'm like, okay, all right. This is my semi-annual refresher.
I'll tell you how I've had to manage it. I've had to separate my identity from mental health practitioner, from guy who sits with messy people.
Yeah.
That is a thing I do. That is not the entirety of me.
Yeah.
And so I have concerns and questions about how AI works and why it's already 140 degrees in Texas. And what about this injustice? And what about this political thing? I like those things. And so when I'm with my friends, I'm just a regular curious guy who likes a bunch of different stuff, who also happens to have gone to a lot of grad school on this thing. And my closest friends know, hey, if my marriage is blowing up, I better be the first person you call.
Yeah.
And that also, my buddy's a banker. If I have a banking question, I know I sit by Dave Ramsey, but my second call is going to be you. And my buddy who's a CFO of a HVAC company. I will never Google anything about air conditioners ever. I just call John and he's like, buy this one. And I just buy that one. I don't even read because I've outsourced that. So we all have an expertise that, of course, I want my friends to call, but they know and I know. We don't just sit around and talk about air conditioners 5 hours, right? We don't talk about the banking system, right? But we do talk about things that we're a part of. So that for me has been hard because I got to separate this fact that I'm more than just a guy who has this particular skill set.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, at our self-care event, we did have some FAQs towards the end. That was 10 minutes long. We wanted to give our listeners and the rest of our staff an opportunity to ask you guys questions as well. Nicole, if you want to lead us with the first question for our list of, we can go from there.
Yeah. So Jordan from Roy asked, what are your thoughts on EMDR therapy?
It is for many, many people a form of sorcery and magic. I love it.
Well, before you guys continue, can one of you guys explain what EMDR is?
EMDR?
Yes.
Eye movement rapid desensitization is what it is. In very, very simple terms, it is using movement to reorganize how and pull apart the experience from the emotion and allow your brain and your body to recategorize it, essentially. So you can tell the story and it's just a story. It's not loaded with all of the emotion that goes with it. And so it allows you physically and mentally and emotionally to process through it and be able to move to further things instead of getting stuck in that trauma. So it sounds really weird because it is literally moving back and forth. And when it first came out, it was rather controversial.
Well, just because it sounded like, I actually think it was controversial from the inside out.
I would agree with that.
Because people were like, no, it can't be that easy.
Yeah.
And it's like, kind of can. Sometimes. And it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
But I've seen that uncoupling of emotion and what actually happened. Pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty incredible stuff. Yeah. And I mean, you have to have the right practitioner, right? Because
the therapeutic alliance and the relationship, all that still matters.
Yeah. Yeah. And the level of training of the therapist, right? If you have big, hefty stuff to work through, you probably might want to make sure that your therapist is experienced enough to handle that.
It's not just waving a pen in front of you.
Yeah. But yeah, it's from what I have seen, I am not certified in EMDR. I don't practice that way. But from what I have observed, it's pretty incredible in the right circumstance.
Okay. Well, we have a listener from St. George. They asked, as a therapist, is it okay to be a more animated therapist and typically not a robotic one?
I think the most important thing for a therapist is to be fully 100% themselves.
Yes.
And if a therapist finds themselves trying to morph to be what a client needs, their client's body will feel that, and it will be an inauthentic experience, and it will become yet another way that client has to perform. And so if you're an animated person, be animated. It will cost you some clients. It will get you some clients. Mm-hmm. If you're more robotic, I remember my wife when she went to see a therapist once, very much like from a typology background, like sat down and was like, on a scale of 1 to 10, dude, I would have been like, I'm out.
Yeah.
Like, let's hug. I don't need to. And she felt so safe with these boundaries. You'll go to the person that is best to you, but a therapist needs to be fully themselves and still ethical and all that. Not an idiot, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Well, another question we have is Evan from Provo. What role do you see teletherapy playing in the future of mental health care? And once again, can one of you guys explain what teletherapy is?
It's essentially therapy over video conferencing, essentially. COVID. That's what the majority of practices did, because we had all the contamination risk, and a lot of therapists went fully remote and kind of stayed that way. We have BetterHelp is the same way right now. They are all across the country. You can get on and chat with a therapist at any point. There's your plug for on our podcast.
Brought to you by.
So, in my opinion, it's not going away.
You basically do teletherapy.
I don't do therapy, and I think that's an important thing. I think what I do is I shine light in dark spaces, and I often encourage people to go see somebody. I will always suggest somebody see someone in person, if at all possible. And like someone like BetterHelp can get you somebody within 48 hours. In many, especially in metropolitan cities, the wait list is months, right? Mm-hmm. And so telehealth therapy can fill gaps, I think. I don't think it's a good solution for months and months and months to work through really hard trauma. I think you need to sit and feel the space of somebody in a room. There is some exciting AI stuff that the computers can diagnose better than people can. Their text responses are coming back and they're indistinguishable. So there's some things that we as therapists have to grapple, or I'm not licensed, but mental health practitioners have to grapple with.
Yeah.
Can I just get on a soapbox for a second?
Absolutely.
I think we've made mental health care much more about transmitting information with each other. And we've made it very cerebral, like up in your head, instead of experiencing another person. And so y'all experienced me as we walked in. Y'all experienced me as tired. Y'all can feel it on me because I've been like going from right. And if we were on a screen, y'all wouldn't feel that. And so we would jump into an experience that wasn't authentic. And so I think the information can be good, the back and forth, like you need to go do this, I need to go do that. That can be captured by a computer. I am continue to be bullish on like a bull market. Like I continue to be very optimistic about the need for real people to get in a room with other real people long term.
We have some relationship questions. One from here is, we have Tom from Salt Lake City. How can we improve communication in marriage to avoid misunderstandings? And can you also talk into, we just did a podcast with George, and he also talked about, he said his take was that if you're married to someone and if you share the same bed with them, you share the same germs with them, you should probably have the same joint bank account. Can you also dive into that as well?
I mean, there's research on that that's pretty clear. You'll have a better marriage. Yeah. Because I think there's a couple of reasons. One is it forces you to sit down and talk. And it forces you to talk about important things like how are we going to spend our money? What do we want to save for? What are we building together? I do think modern marriage has fallen into a strange rut where I use my spouse as a way to fulfill me and she uses me as a way to fulfill her, but we're not building something together. We're both like co-using each other on this path, right? Towards my personal self-actualization. That's not marriage. That's like co-managing. Like, remember that Office episode with Jim and Michael Scott when they're co-managers? It's a disaster. It never works. Mm-hmm. And so that's the modern marriage. And so sharing a bank account, putting all the money in the pot, what's ours is ours, forces you to build something together. And that's hard, and it's worth it on the long run. What was your first question?
It was how can we improve communication in a marriage to avoid misunderstandings?
I don't want to avoid misunderstanding. That's a part of life. And I think trying to avoid misunderstandings, you end up not saying things that you need to say. Mm-hmm. And that's not a good thing. I think probably the easiest tip I would give in this short of a format would be the pictures and words. Have you all heard me talk about that? Mm-hmm. I think we think in pictures, but we speak in words. And it happens with, hey, I need some time when the kids get home. All right, cool. So after dinner and after the house is clean and after the roof is done and the yard is mowed, take all the time you want, right? Versus, no, I need you to like do dinner and bedtimes because I need a break. And so I think the more married couples any couples can speak into what's your picture of that. And so similar, hey, let's go on vacation. What's your picture of that look like? Camping versus going to Japan, right? Mm-hmm. So pictures and words. What's your picture of whatever y'all are talking about look like?
Yeah, and I think the other piece to it too that I would add is if you are thinking it, but you are avoiding saying it, that's probably a sign that you need to say it.
Secrets will kill you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it may be that you need to say it in a way that's different from what's in your head, right? Because my inside voice is sometimes not very nice. And it's not going to come across very well if my inside voice is running the whole show. And so I might need to tweak it a little bit, but if I'm avoiding saying it, that means that it needs to be said even more. Yeah. One thing that I wanted to get your thoughts on, positive psychology and optimism and all the research that there is behind that, versus toxic positivity.
Yes.
And kind of what role does positive psychology play? And where do you see toxic positivity coming in and being a problem?
So positive psychology, look at me going back to my grad school days.
It takes me back too.
It's the great Martin Seligman.
Yeah.
This idea that psychologists, like most of modern psychology, was the study of what's wrong with people. Mm-hmm. And Martin said, well, what if Dr. Seligman, right? I'm calling him Marty because we're buddies.
We're buddies, yeah.
Dr. Seligman, we're not buddies. I've never met the guy. He's a legend. Said, what if we didn't spend all of our time looking at what's wrong with people, but we spent our time looking at what's amazing and right about people? And that spawned a whole new universe. Like, what are the healthy habits of top performers, and what are the people who make the most money do? So it launched that whole thing. Like, what do the best people do? Like the best moms, the best dads, the best truck drivers, whatever. And so the way I have distilled it down over the years, as all the research has come out, is most people who struggle with depression, most people who struggle with anxiety, there's that sense that this is the way this is. This is the way this is always going to be. This is the way I'm always going to feel. And things are always going to end badly for me. Positive psychology gives me an exercise to say, okay, but what if it all works out? And that's a question that when you're feeling low or you're feeling anxious, we never ask ourselves. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, she's going to go to this party and then she's going to see this guy and then it's going to be over. Okay, that could happen. But what if it doesn't? Walk me through. She goes to that party and misses you so bad. And she gets in her car, comes home early and knocks on the door with a bucket of chicken wings and y'all hug, right? And so I think it's an exercise in what's the other side of this imaginary story I'm making up. And so in that way, positive psychology is immensely good. But I want the distinguishing trait between that and toxic positivity is this. What if it all works out? Toxic positivity is, it's always going to all work out. And that's not true. It's just as much of a lie as it's always going to be awful. Mm-hmm. That's not true either. Mm-hmm. And so toxic positivity is it's a Xanax. It's a way to get through the world and not experience it as it truly is. And the unfortunate thing about that is like math doesn't care how happy you are, and abusive relationships don't care how happy you are. And so it will get you sooner or later.
Yeah. Well, it kind of like at the core of the latest book of choosing reality, right? It's not all doom and gloom, and it's not all rainbows and sunshine. It's all a little bit of both. Yeah. And so, yeah, I love that.
And by the way, plug for the new Inside Out movie. I thought they did a great job.
I'm so excited to see it.
They did a great job. I won't spoil everything, but they did a great job on that particular thing.
Awesome.
That wallpapering over or getting rid of uncomfortable things gives you a teeny tiny bit of solace in the moment, but it costs you so much over the course of your life.
Yeah. I actually had a client bring that movie up last week in our session, and she like really connected with certain pieces of it. So they must have done something right.
They did.
That's awesome.
There was two little things. If they had done it, it would have been so perfect. Only because it would have matched my book perfectly. But they did a great
endorsement
job.
From Disney.
It was excellent.
Oh, that's awesome. Another question that we had was from Mindy in Brigham said, when going through life-changing chapters, how do you do it more gracefully? I went from full-time mom to empty nester and felt like life got tipped upside down on me.
Oh, I don't try to grace at all. Grace is something I extend to other people. If I am trying an entire life shift, I try to be as respectful as I can and learn as much as I can as we're going. So I worked in universities for 20 years as a professor and a dean of students. And then like literally over a weekend, I became a media personality. I had no social media. I didn't know how any of this stuff works. I didn't know about all this stuff. And so there was no illusion I was going to make that transition gracefully. I was going to treat everybody right. I was going to get the professional help and mentorship that I need. I was going to learn everything I could about this world. I'm not.
I guess that makes sense because you have no frame of reference for it at that point.
And if you're a professional mom going full tilt, and then suddenly you just like you get pregnant, you said I'm gonna stay home. You think you have a reference point, but you don't. You have no idea.
Yeah.
And if you think I'm just gonna have my baby, and then in 6 months I'm gonna go back full tilt, you don't know what that's gonna be like either. And so trying to be graceful often. We don't say the thing we need to say. That's squashing feelings. It's squashing needs. It's squashing desires. And it's about performance. I want this to look smooth. That's not my goal. My goal is to get to the other side of this thing or get through this thing. And you can only do that clumsily, awkwardly, right through the middle of it.
Yeah. Well, and I find that's another piece where authenticity comes like home to roost. If I'm trying to do it like somebody else, that's not true to me, I'm going to come out an anxious disaster.
That's right.
Versus, no, this is how I'm going to do it. This is what feels true and genuine and authentically like me. And as long as, like you say, I'm being respectful and kind and doing all the good human things, really at the end of the day, that's where you want to be, is authentic to yourself.
Yeah.
So,
and I remember when I had a newborn, he was just up motoring around. So maybe my son was 8 or 9 months old. And a buddy of mine that came over, was 10 years ahead of me, so his kids were a little bit older. And I was cleaning up, and he just said, dude, sit down. Your house is trash for the next 18 years. Just sit down. And I remember being like, what are you talking about? And he goes, let it ride, man. Yeah. And he was trying to hang out. He had come over to hang out, and he was so right. And I was trying to make this thing, I wanted it to be graceful. I wanted it to be perfect. Bro, let that go. Let your kid have fun. Hang out with your buddy. Let your son see you hanging out with your buddy. Like, that's way more important than all that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Ooh, if I'm in a relationship. So Soraya from Brigham City said, if I'm in a relationship with someone with unhealed trauma, how can I best support their healing without losing myself or turning them into a project?
Ooh. All right. I'm going to answer that like in real time. Is that cool?
Absolutely.
Meaning, I'm going to give you the best answers off the top of my head.
Okay.
Answer number one is the trauma is not yours to discuss, so be invited into that conversation. For instance, if your boyfriend's late, don't sit in the car and be like, you know where that comes from? Like, that's not your story to enter into. It's a story to be invited into. So spend all of your energy focusing on the behaviors. You can't talk to me like that. I don't care where it came from. Like, I need you to be on time. When you're late, it makes me feel unloved or disrespected. You like fill in the blank, whatever the behavior is that you're concerned with, spend your energy there.
Mm-hmm.
The trauma is for the particular person who was traumatized to work back and deal with. And some of us need to do these new behaviors. Like, I'm speaking for me personally, I had to go back and deal with that. And that was not fun. But my wife couldn't do that.
Yeah.
My kids couldn't do that. It had to be me. But I wanted to be a more safe, peaceful presence. And I built as big a wall and as soundproof a wall as I could, and it just didn't work. And so I had to go back and deal with some of this stuff. And so spend time focusing on the behaviors. The second thing is do what you have to do to stay well and to be well. And if you need them to be well for you to be okay, that's codependency, and that's not helpful for anybody. So you need to have your friends, you need to have your counselor, you need to have your fitness plan or whatever you're doing. And a third thing is, instead of saying you need to go do X, Y, and Z, say, I'm going to go talk to a counselor. Why are you going to a counselor? Because I'm not doing a good job of telling you how much I love you and how scared I am that you drink so much, or how I'm not doing a good job and I want to learn some new skills. And so all I can do in this moment is take care of my thoughts and my actions. So I'm going to go see somebody. And maybe this person overreacts and like, I can't believe it. But maybe that person over time witnesses the changes that you're making in your life, and that can become an invitation. And the fourth one is just good boundaries.
Yeah.
But that loops back to focusing on actions.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if it's helpful or not. That was a good question off the top of my head. Think through that.
I think you did well. Yeah. Burgundy from Cedar City asked, how do you connect with someone you love who is feeling helpless and hopeless?
Ask that again.
How do you connect with someone you love who is feeling helpless and hopeless? So it sounds like a partner who's in deep depression.
Yeah.
How do I connect with you?
This is going to sound like a strange thing. Invite them in whatever teeny tiny possible way they can to have a purpose in that moment or in that day or in that relationship. And often we think, I'm going to take all the burden away. I'm not going to ask them to do anything. I'm not going to ask anybody to participate in anything. And so here's an example. I'll use my kid because that's my son. My wife was out of town this past weekend, so me and the kids were doing all of our farm chores and all the work out there. My daughter's 8. She can't do a whole lot. And she's old enough now to realize she's kind of in the way a lot. And she's like, you want to play? And I've got like straw and all like foot. And she's like, let's play. I'm clearly doing something. I'm sweating hot. She walks over to my son and he's shoveling a thing. And she's like, you don't want to play with me? And he's like, we're working. So I called her and said, I need you to do a job that I think is probably going to be too old for you, but I trust that you can get it done. She's like, what is that? Like, she's just attitude. Yeah. And I have this electric mower, which as a Texan, I realize that's wrong. But you just push a button on it. Yeah. But it's self-propel. And my backfield is several acres. And there was a piece of it around a garden. And I said, I'm going to pay you a lot of money, but I need you to mow this. Eyes got big. And I gave her a teeny tiny job. But I gave her a purpose. And it was just enough that she could accomplish it. And it wasn't too much. I didn't say, get on the riding lawnmower and do the whole place or anything like that. Trim some trees. It was a tiny little thing. And I'm telling you what, watching her, I got all choked up watching her. She was struggling with that mower because it's so big as she was trying to figure out how to turn it. And she'd get frustrated and she'd keep going. She was sweating. And dude, that yard looked so terrible. It was a nightmare. But she did it. Yeah. And she felt 100 feet tall. Yeah. And so often if somebody's really low and we're trying to connect, it is, hey, I'm going to do all the stuff, which I have found further proves to the person, oh, I've got no value here. Yeah. And saying, hey, I need some warmth. Can I curl up next to you so I can borrow your nervous system for a bit? I just gave you a job. I gave you a purpose. Hey, it would mean the world to me if you would come over here and just stir these eggs while I do this and this. That'd be a gift. Hey, we're going out to eat, but you have to drive. I'm in no shape to. You have to drive. I'm a terrible driver, and you know this, right? Whatever the little step, I'm going to give you a purpose, and let you begin to take a baby step. And connection happens through shared goals, not me taking all the weight off the bar for you.
Absolutely, I love that. In terms of ongoing maintenance, so we've done the SelfCare Summit. Now we're here doing the podcast, and we're looking at longevity because historically, we do pretty good with we do pretty good with the initial kickoff of a thing. Ongoing implementation maintenance is a little bit rough. So what would you suggest for our team who went to the summit, they got pumped up, and then they went home? We built them the 360 app, so they had the tools to be able to, put in practices and set goals and all of those things. Thank you. What would you suggest to them as far as those sorts of things go?
2 things.
Okay.
Thing number 1, I have come to believe that there's few things on earth worse than watching someone you love make unhealthy choices or not love themselves as much as you love them through their actions. Meaning, you're a mom and you're watching your 24-year-old son drink himself to death, and you can't do anything about it. Watching your spouse continually not believe that she or he is beautiful or attractive. And it's haunting because I can't make you, I see how beautiful you are and I can't do anything to, right? I think that's one of the hardest things. And so circling all the way back to the very beginning, I know how much you love the people that choose to come be a part of the mission of ETBS. And I also know how much y'all invest. It's a staggering amount of money, right? Yep. And I know how much that hurts to see stuff get unused. And then to hear like, hey, we're really struggling with our money. Hey, we feel burned out. And you're like, I know. That's why we did all this stuff, right? It's so hard. And so to the people listening, if you're like driving right now or you're cleaning something and you just got headphones in or you're exercising or go for a walk, whatever you're doing, my challenge to you is to commit to 90 days of just going comically all in. Do it all of it for just 90 days. And if your life is not demonstrably better after 90 days, just quit. Call the bluff. But so my challenge to the people listening, to like the folks who are on this great team, like utilize the resources hardcore for a season and see if it doesn't make a dramatic difference in your life. The other side for leaders, I think at the end of the day, people are pretty simple creatures and we just do what we're incentivized to do. And so I don't know how you build that into some sort of incentive structure, but it has to, for it to be a part of the culture. So here where I work at Ramsey Solutions, everybody discusses openly, and Dave is and the board are convinced in their, like at the genetic level, you have to meet together, you have to eat together, and you have to play together. So there are mandatory meetings, 2 of them, where all 1,000 people who work here get in the same room on Mondays and Wednesdays. That's an end of discussion. That is a mandatory meeting. Because they believe that people who meet together, see each other face to face, have better team over time. The second thing is Dave built a cafeteria here and he subsidizes the food. It encourages us to eat here. We have to decide, I want to leave campus and pay more money somewhere else and leave. And then the third is there's play opportunities, right? We also have a weird culture where everyone yells out their net worth during staff meetings and stuff. It's super odd, but
you do you, man.
I'm saying. But you get what you incentivize. And so I don't know what that means at the leadership level. I don't know if there's a way to tie raises or tie bonuses or whatever speaks to your community, tie days off. I don't know how that works. Or if you're George, to tie like obnoxiously expensive hair products, right? Which is all he uses.
But his hair looks really great. You got to give him
because it's made out of cement. Very like bougie cement.
Okay.
But whatever it is, I think leadership has to say, this matters to us so much. We're willing to lose people over it. We're willing to move priorities around. And so we're doing all these things. to make it a part of the culture. And we're going to keep doing those things. And over time, the people who want to be a part of this thing will be a part of this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
For the team members that were not able to make the SelfCare Summit, can you quickly give a brief summary of the IM360 app?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And you guys have any last final thoughts before we end this episode?
Yeah. So within the app, there is daily check-ins. Their smiley face rating system. That's it. You go in. It's like a five different faces. You pick your face for the day. This is how I'm doing. That gives your leadership insight into how you're doing. And I've noticed it also makes a difference in how I show up throughout the day. So if first thing in the morning, I put I'm at the super sad, I'm not okay face, all day long, I'm reminded, oh yeah, I'm not okay today. Versus if I'm so it's almost turned into more of a, this is where I want to be rather than this is where I'm at. And then it influences me backwards. So playing around with that. But there's the daily pulse checks with the smiley face rating that your leader can see. There's gratitude and journaling practices or reflection practices in there so that you can look for the good, and you can also have those opportunities to kind of reflect and see, this is kind of where I'm at. Get it out of your head and your heart. And then there's also a goal setting feature in there as well of, this is where I want to be. This is why I want to get there. This is how I'm going to get there. And you're able to build in trackers and systems to be able to help you get to your goal, instead of just, oh yeah, I want to, pay off $5,000. What are you actually going to do to get you there on a regular basis? Because it's not the big overarching thing. It's the daily practices that you're incorporating into your life that help you to get to where you want to go. And so the app has built that in there to help move people to where they want to go. There's also a resources section in there. And then there is a crisis helpline, find me a therapist kind of a place when people are very not okay. So that's,
for me, it looks like it's if you look around just globally, everybody's broke, everybody's burned out, everybody's breaking up, everybody's just the path we've been told, this is how to live life, or as George said, this is normal. It's awful.
Yeah.
And I think all of us collectively are recognizing that. All these maps we're given don't work. And so this is feels like a map into a new way to do life. And be reflective and practice these things, and you just have to take care of your money and all these new things that we just weren't taught. And I appreciate it for that. It's cool.
Hey listeners, for more information or resources, you can check out our website at utahbehaviorservices.com. You can also check out our social medias at Utah Behavior Services on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Also, don't be afraid to reach out and email us at bridgingthegap@utbs.co. And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in.